India and the world is celebrating the International Year of Millets. I am here at a premier research station in Hyderabad called the International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, or ICRISAT. And I'm standing in a field of millets. And I have with me Dr. Kuldeep Singh, one of India's pioneering persons who's looked after many gene banks. He was the head of the National Gene Bank in New Delhi. And today he is heading the gene bank at ICRISAT, where millets and certain legumes are part of his portfolio. So we will understand from him what a gene bank is and why do we need it and why and what is the role of international centers like ICRISAT in giving food security. Thanks a lot for speaking to me, Dr. Kuldeep. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Dr. Kuldeep, for our naive audience, see, they may have heard of piggy bank, reserve bank. What is a gene bank?
Thank you, Palvaji. You're welcome to the ICRISAT Gene Bank. The first thing, what the gene bank is, I will give a brief overview. See, agriculture has a history of around 10,000 to 12,000 years with different crops. And the modern agricultural sciences are around 100 years or so. Mm-hmm. So if we see the evolution, most of the crops which we have now, the humans have domesticated that from the wild. And everyone in different regions of the world started selecting the ones which were best for them. So what happened with the modern sciences, with the genetic principles known, we started more modern plant breeding. And that led to development of really some high-yielding varieties, better in nutrition, better in diet, better in disease resistance. So, as a result, when these started going to the farmers had no option but to adopt the best one. And as a result, they would have thrown all what was their heritage for thousands of years into the bin. And it takes just 1 year to throw anything which you have over millions of years or thousands of years.
And the farmer will select what is good for him. It is private business. He will do what is best for him.
True. I mean, see, the modern varieties were paying him better. Seed system was operational. Better seeds were coming, so they were really benefiting out of that one. And that's where the scientific community realized that what has been adapted, developed by the humankind over thousands of years, that must be preserved. And that led to the concept what we call as gene banks. So here, systematically, globally, nationally, regionally, people started going to the farmers, collecting their produce, and we are conserving them, what we call in the gene banks.
So you collect the seeds or whatever is for vegetative propagation, and then you store them in artificial conditions?
Yes, we have different ways, different procedures. See, the scientific principles research led us to know that if we take the seed, dry it to a moisture content below 5%, and store it at minus 18 to minus 20 degrees Celsius, this seed will remain viable for 40 to 50 years or even more. And that is what we call as a gene bank. And most of the what we call an ex situ, collected from their original habitats and depositing here. So all seeds we are conserving primarily at minus 20 degrees Celsius, where you can be sure that seed will remain viable for almost 50 years.
Now, where are we standing and what are these fields all from here to there?
Good. So if I give a background little about ICRISAT. ICRISAT, as you told, is an international agriculture research center with a support from Government of India, and it was established in 1972. So this has a mandate of working on several aspects, including the crop improvement. So I will stress only on the crop improvement part. And for crop improvement part, we have a mandate to work on 11 different crops. That includes 3 legumes and 8 millets. All these crops are of dryland importance. I'll come to the millets primarily. So the fields right now we are here. ICRISAT has a mandate for conserving genetic resources of 8 such millets, which are pearl millet, little millet, kodo millet, barnyard millet, proso millet, finger millet, and little millet. The one we are sitting here right now, this is little millet. And ICRISAT is conserving, total our gene bank has around over 129,000 accessions coming from 145 countries.
How much number did you say of accession?
129,000 plus. That means 1.29 lakh samples.
So you will have individual containers with so many different seeds, and all conserved for decades, correct?
Yes, that's true. So we are conserving that at 2 places, one at minus 20 degrees Celsius and one at 4 degrees, because our job is not only to conserve it, our job is to make it available to the global community. And ICRISAT Gene Bank has so far distributed over 1.6 million samples to 150 countries.
So more than 10 times of what your collection is, ICRISAT has been able to distribute for others to develop better crops. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if we see that way, so this germplasm which went to different places, there are documented 65 varieties which have been selected from this one and released. And using this basic genetic resources, ICRISAT developed improved germplasm, which led to a release of more than 1,200 varieties globally on these ICRISAT mandate crops.
Now, you are also head of the National Gene Bank. Now, how is the ICRISAT Gene Bank different from the National Gene Bank? And if you can tell me what the National Gene Bank is. It is like the reserve bank of our future, and not money, but the wealth.
On a lighter note, I said, if something happens to the banks which are depositing money, you can reprint those notes. But if something happens to this, we cannot recover that one. So this is a basic difference between the gene banks which are conserving money versus with the gene banks which are conserving the genes.
So like the Silicon Bank has gone down, or we've heard of some monetary banks going down, or the crisis which we see in Sri Lanka, or the crisis we see in Pakistan, which is monetary crisis. This is really conserving what would be man or human's heritage, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is in fact more important than our currency, I tell you. Now, coming to what you ask about National Gene Bank versus, India's National Gene Bank is the second largest gene bank in the world.
Second largest?
Yes, conserving more than 4.5 lakh samples of almost more than 1,800 different species which are related to the crops. So it's a larger gene bank of national importance with a much wider, larger mandate. ICRISAT has a very specialized mandate, but very focused. So here, as I told you, we have the millets, and total around 78,000 samples are of millets only. And more, there are 2 basic differences here. So the National Gene Bank will have most of the resources collected from the nation, although there are some from outside as well. But here is the most diverse. As I told you, total 145 countries. So the global diversity is conserved here. This gene bank is very...
Which is almost 2/3 of the countries of the world have contributed to the gene bank.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Amazing. I tell you.
So this is one of the very well characterized gene bank. What I told you, we have 129,000 accessions. We have data on each one of them, what we call a preliminary data. So that if anybody wants to use it, they can go to our database, see what they are looking for. If they're looking for a plant which is very tall, or they're looking for a plant which is dwarf, or maybe we have some not complete, but availability of data, okay, which has a resistance to particular disease or particular insect, or which accession has a tolerance to drought or salinity, or which may have a high protein content. All this data is available on this gene bank.
So you have seeds, and the data is stored on computers. They are numbered. How does one know that this particular box has this particular trait in it?
See, each accession, each sample is an accession, what we call them scientifically, has a unique ID, unique number in it. And for example, here we have the data on when it was planted. What's the plant height of that one? How many days it took for flowering? How many days it took for maturity? What's the grain size of this one? All this data is available, and this is available to anyone globally, open source data, because we are a public good. All these genetic resources ICRISAT Gene Bank is conserving. We are the custodians. We are not the owners of this one. The owners are the countries where from this has come. But since there's a treaty, what's called as International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, to which almost 148 countries are signatories now. Those who have contributed germplasm under this treaty, so that germplasm is available for multilateral exchange. So for example, India has already designated 23,000 accessions which are available for multilateral distribution. That's available in National Gene Bank database. If we see the total germplasm of the CG gene banks, almost more than 70,000 accessions are of Indian origin. So the government of India has committed that for the multilateral exchange. So any germplasm which is of Indian origin and available here with us in this gene bank, this is available to everyone under the multilateral.
So, and how much do you charge for people, say the Indian Institute of Millets, if it wants to access plant or accession A, accession B, how much would ICRISAT charge them?
ICRISAT does not charge anyone anything for the germplasm. This germplasm is being distributed under the treaty free of charge to anyone in the world.
That is an amazing service. So how do you fund the gene bank?
Well, there are several funding agencies. Initially, most of the money was coming from the CGIAR,
which is the consultative group on international agricultural research, once based in Washington, D.C. and now based somewhere.
That's true. But now, as of today, the ICRISAT is supporting this gene bank, partly. And part of this support money is coming from Crop Trust. And this Crop Trust is basically an offshoot of FAO based on this international treaty. So when the treaty was framed, there is a sort of understanding that the Crop Trust will raise something around $850 million US, and that seed money, the interest incurred on that one, would be sufficient to support most of the what we call as Article 15 gene banks. And they are working on that direction. And right now we have a support of around $400,000 coming from Crop Trust. But there's another system, the Crop Trust, what we call as a long-term partnership agreement. So you have some basic indicators, basic parameters. So ICRISAT Gene Bank has completed all of them. We are left with one. That all this germplasm, what I told you, 129,000 accessions, has to be safely duplicated at two levels. One we have completed, that's at Svalbard in Norway.
Which is in a very cold area. It's like the reserve bank of genes in the Arctic Circle.
Absolutely. So 94% of our germplasm seeds are already deposited there, right? The second, we have to have it at another gene bank which is easily accessible. Suppose if anything happens, we should be able to access it immediately onto this one. We have completed 72% as of now, but by this year end, we'll be completing 90% of the safety duplicates, and that's going in different gene banks.
So a gene bank in a way can be called the Doomsday Vault. If something goes wrong and you need to have particular seeds available, a gene bank is like a Doomsday Vault?
This is what Svalbard is generally named as a Doomsday Vault, because we are conserving all our natural resources there, ensuring if something happens at the other parts of the world, you can retrieve that one. And that has actually happened. ICRISAT gene bank that was in Syria, they really had this trouble. They could not get seeds from their gene bank, and ultimately they went back to the Svalbard, retrieved their germplasm, and they actually multiplied it. But here, saying at two places is ensuring that your germplasm is safe. As I told you, because this is something, once you lose it forever.
I know, even in normal banks, see, the data is stored in two places. Even Aadhaar data is stored in two different places, geographically different. In case of a fire, you are protected in some form or the other. So you are also following the standard operating principles of conserving whatever you have, whether it is data or genes or seeds, in a way that your grandchildren and my grandchildren should be able to access it. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And ensuring that all this germplasm which is at ICRISAT, it's stored at two places in the world other than the ICRISAT.
And normally, how do you store them? Do you store them in very cold conditions, and how do you keep the cold conditions?
Yeah, most of the seeds, germplasm which we are using is seed-based. And the seeds, when we are harvesting them, we dry them in a very specialized chamber, which are maintained at 15 degrees Celsius and at 15% relative humidity. So this drying process is slow, but it does not affect the quality of the seed. Once we dry it at a level which is less than 5%, then we vacuum pack it in the 4-layered aluminum foils. And those are then stored at minus 20 degrees Celsius.
Minus 20?
Yes, minus 18 to minus 20 degrees Celsius.
That's roughly the temperature we would see in parts of Ladakh and Siachen in the cold regions. I know there is also a seed bank somewhere in Ladakh where the India stores it's like a Doomsday Vault.
Yeah, that was an experimental gene bank. It's at a very high altitude, 16,000. But thereafter, there's already a report under the chairmanship of Dr. R.S. Paroda, which has been submitted to the Indian Council of Agriculture Research for having a gene bank or what we call a safety duplicate gene bank for the nation. So that's in the process. I'm sure the things are moving forward.
Now, your gene bank is also named after our very famous scientist at the gene bank at ICRISAT, Dr. R.S. Paroda. Tell me a little bit about Dr. R.S. Paroda and why do we have his name on the gene bank?
Personally, I always call him as an institutional builder. If you see even in the ICAR, the total infrastructure Dr. Paroda has generated is unparalleled. And he also had that vision of supporting the international agriculture research centers as well. I'm sure the way he supported ICRISAT, probably ICRISAT thought that something should be paid back to his individual, what we call as memories or so. And that was in early 2000 that this gene bank was dedicated to his name. So it's called as Rajendra Singh Paroda Gene Bank at ICRISAT.
Now, ICRISAT is celebrating 50 years of its existence, and I remember our Prime Minister Narendra Modi coming here. When he came here, what did he say and what did he do?
Well, I think the first message from him was recognizing the contribution of ICRISAT to the drylands. And second was his commitment that when India will celebrate 100 years, ICRISAT will celebrate 75 years. So that was a commitment from the Prime Minister of the country for a continued support to the ICRISAT and its working.
Now, let's focus a little bit on millets. And this is the year of millets. Why are millets called the superfoods or the magic foods? And why are they called the solution to climate change? So there are three different questions. We'll come to them one by one, but I'm leaving them in your mind. So why are millets important and considered superfoods?
ICRISAT calls them smart foods for three basic reasons. One, they are good for environment, they are good for soil, they are good for health. That's why, based on these three things, we call them as the smart foods. Now, coming to the health. Now, these are the class of millets which are very rich, or I would say rich in minerals, rich in proteins, rich in antioxidants, and this is when I'm comparing with other two major cereals, rice and wheat, and non-allergic, so non-gluten, the gluten-free. So these are the three basic things into this one, and also the glycemic index of most of the millets is much lower than rice is. So that means for diabetic patients, if you want to manage diabetes, this could be a good source solution to this one.
Now,
see, look at the national. If I take India as an example, you compare the National Family Health Survey 4 vis-a-vis 5. The mineral content or the stunting and wasting in the country has increased. If you see
hidden hunger.
I believe one of the reasons could be because most of the public sector distribution of these millets, grains, is wheat and rice. So we are actually monopolizing it, are really narrowing our food intake. See, no crop is what we call perfect. Some crops have one thing in good in them. Other crops have second good thing, third crop has third good thing. So that's why the question here is to have a diversification both in the fields and diversification in our diets.
Sir, it was already there till, and I must say, you are a person who's known for his work on wheat, till wheat and rice took over. In my own house, we used to have pearl millet and sorghum and ramdana, and you name all the smaller grains. And now Prime Minister has called them Shri Anna. Shri Anna is coarse millet. What? Coarse cereal was such a bad word. Now we call them Shri Anna. We are elevating them. Now, how are they good for climate, fighting climate change?
Excellent. First, let me compliment the Honorable Prime Minister of India, who has really gone long way in the renaming from coarse millets to first as
coarse cereals,
from pseudo cereals into nutri cereals and Shri Anna now, which is a very important word from India on this one. And I think that's important. Now, look, before I go to the climate, I tell you one more thing. If you see the traditional system, you always had the people having small quantities of pearl millet or ragi or maize or sorghum being blended with our wheat flour and other. Correct. Now, when the commercialization is happening, so these things are getting reduced actually. So our purpose is, if you really want a healthy population, we should have a diversified food. And diversification in terms of the cereals, diversification in terms of vegetables, fruits. We are not only saying millets, all others. So diversification per se is required for a healthy population.
सर जी, आप पंजाब से आते हो, थाली में खाते हैं हम, थाली में अलग अलग चीज़ें होती हैं, तो थाली के अंदर केवल राइस व्हीट भी नहीं हो, मिलेट भी हो, और सब्जी भी हो, और दही भी हो, दूध भी हो, मक्खन भी हो, सब चीज़ होनी है. तो ये जो था, ये क्या राइस, when we introduced rice and wheat in a big way, why did we lose our Shri Anna?
that will be a personal opinion. Globally, we emphasized a lot on the improvement of three major cereals. That's wheat, rice, and they're not to be blamed.
No, you cannot blame.
That
They gave us.
important for food security.
Correct.
Right? Now, the total global investment into research into these crops helped us actually to bring the productivity and the sustainability to a very high level. As a result, the cost of production at the moment, or cost of those two cereals vis-a-vis these other cereals will be different because the production level is low in this case. And the government's policies of distributing, making it available to aam aadmi, to everyone, not only here but everywhere in the world as well. So I think then we realize probably if you're eating only one or two types of the foods, cereals, you are bound to have the deficiencies at one or the other type. And that is where we are really looking if we want these millets to be a main part of the food, I won't say main, part of the food as well. So we really have to increase the productivity of these ones. Now you raised a question how they are better or how they will be performing with the climate change.
How they will fight climate change? See, it's not just performing better, but fighting, because they are a magic bullet for that.
Pearl millet is one such crop which is already adapted to the highest temperature conditions, be it extreme western Rajasthan or Sahara. This is a crop which is well established. So if anything happens, I mean the regions which were cooler than this one,
correct,
if the temperature in those crops regions rises, pearl millet will be the one that will get handy to those ones. We are looking overall globally the availability of the water. It is declining. And so we really need to have a diversification such a way, ensuring that we shouldn't recommend the crops which are requiring high water to the regions where the water level is low, and these crops can adapt very well. I will also not see any millet being recommended to the areas which has a marshy land and more water and all. No, every crop has evolved.
Correct.
Evolved for a particular niche. So let's maintain those niche areas for each of the crops. So these are traditionally, if you do the total water requirement of these ones is much lower than wheat and rice and maize. The temperatures under which they're growing, they're already adapted to the higher temperatures. Salinity, some of these crops like finger millet, that has per se a higher tolerance to salinity. So these crops have an inherent, because these got actually adapted, evolved in those regions which were already the harshest ones. What is more required now? The scientific growth of these, good support from the global communities, so that the real genetic improvement of these crops is done and their productivity levels reach as high as we have in wheat and rice.
Now, can you explain to me, say, kilogram to kilogram for the production of 1 kg of rice and 1 kg of, say, pearl millet or bajra? What would be the resources required? Let's compare just two, water and the calorific output. Is pearl millet and rice going to give me equivalent amount of calories, 1 kg?
Calories, yes, more or less, because the starch content is more or less the same. But one important thing here, in case of the millets, the glycemic index is low. That means release of the starch in your gut is slower. So that's the one good thing, especially for those who are diabetics and other things.
Now, what about water? How much water would 1 kg of rice need and 1 kg of pearl millet need? By percentages, if you can tell me.
A global estimate for rice is available. They say something 4,000 to 5,000 liters of water per kg of rice is known. This is very well documented. And pearl millet may require around 1/4 or 1/5 of the total water than rice will require.
So as the world warms up and climate change comes in, we would probably see more area going under millets and the area under rice and wheat may come down. Is that Dr. Kuldeep Singh's thought process?
Wish list would be there. But actually, whether it will happen, economics will determine it. Ultimately, the farmers will look in terms of the total money they get per unit of area, per unit time.
Sure, policies will decide many things, but looking at it from the perspective of sustainability and what is called the green revolution, millets would be a good opportunity.
I would say yes, and I am optimistic that the government of India's this effort of asking or requesting UN to declare 2023 as the International Year of Millets, this will give more awareness, especially to the young generations. I will still say, because that coarse grain name got embedded too much into the brains that many people may not like adopt it. Also, we need to invest into the processing of these ones, because the whole things are changing, our kitchens are changing, our people are changing. So we really make these amenable to the processing as well, so that these could be used as easily as other crops are being used.
Now, any message, Dr. Kuldeep Singh, you are a very senior scientist, highly respected, not just in India, across the world. You are the custodian of the National Gene Bank, you are the custodian of the Gene Bank in the ICRISAT. India is holding the presidency of the G20. And in G20, 85% of the geographical area of the world is represented. The largest economies are represented. And India is celebrating the year of millets, and so is UN. Any message from Dr. Kuldeep Singh to the heads of state of the G20 countries, especially on agriculture and two on millets?
Thank you, Parvaji. Definitely. Let me give a small message for millets, for the G20 countries, that if G20 countries can adopt a resolution of having an international initiative on millet research, I think that will boost investment into the millets and more awareness among the millets, specifically for this one. Global agriculture, I think...
You will pass on that. It is too big, huh? But you are a policy man, sir. You have given India the strength. See, and one should say, we are talking wheat and rice and maize. Wheat and rice gave us, we have stopped talking so much about hunger. We have started talking about hidden hunger. So at least the calorie needs have been fulfilled by those three crops.
See, absolutely. It's not... we cannot forget that two crops, wheat and rice, have given to the global community.
Correct.
I mean, we have become what we call as self-sufficient food grains, India, the two crops. And three things really helped into this one. One, the scientific investment into these crops, and global, both national and global, the government policies, and farmers' participation in that. That's more important.
Yes.
So farmers accepted, adopted those technologies, blindly what the governments... I mean, I can still say the universities, the farmers still respect a lot to the universities, and whatever universities have said to them, ICR system, I call it ICR system.
Sure.
ICR system has said to them, they have gone blindly to accept that one, and that has paid us. And I'm sure with this International Year of Millets, more and more awareness will spread into these crops, and more investment will come into these crops, so that there will be, we don't call it substitution and replacement. No, every crop has its niche, its place. But some diversification will be definitely required, and that will help us in saving our environment and actually making our population more healthy, more vibrant, in fact.
So future of agriculture is bright?
100%.
So that was Dr. Kuldeep Singh. We are standing in a field of the gene bank where you see scores of varieties of millets. This is the future. This is what will make sure that we have an food independent India and a food secure world. And I say this very boldly. Google can't give you bread. ChatGPT can't give you chapatis. It is only scientists like Dr. Kuldeep Singh who stand and toil in the sun, both in winter, in summer, and in minus 20 degrees inside the cold chambers of the gene bank. They are the people who will give us food security and food independence. The next big goal, like Dr. Kuldeep Singh says, is removing hidden hunger. India used to be living on ship to mouth. Today, we are a net exporter of cereals. What a great achievement, all largely by our Indian agriculture scientists. Next step, removing hidden hunger and getting rid of stunting in children. And I'm sure with the efforts of scientists like Dr. Kuldeep Singh, that should also be history. But where I'm standing is literally the gene bank, or the bank where humanity's food supply would be conserved, not just for decades, but for centuries. From Hyderabad, Pallav Bagla. ठीक हो गया साहब? अच्छा हो गया?
ठीक हो गया?
God bless you. You are always so good.